This podcast is all about improving your reptile husbandry. However, I know not everybody has the time or the money to go out and spend thousands of dollars doing custom builds. Thankfully, friend of the podcast, Josh Halter, aka the Bio Dude, is working hard to make better care more accessible. He makes turnkey bioactive kits for leopard geckos, ball pythons, tortoises, invertebrates, dart frogs, and the list continues to grow. He has spent years testing and perfecting these handcrafted substrates and dietary supplements to create the most effective products. If you visit thebiodude.com, you will see he is a proud supporter of both USARK and responsible reptile keeping, and there is an option to donate to either at checkout. Welcome back to the Animals at Home podcast. My name is Dylan Perrin. Thank you so much for listening to the show today. Today I'm speaking with Shira Loa, who runs a YouTube channel and Instagram page called Snake Therapy with Shira Loa. In the episode, we discuss the therapeutic benefits that snake keeping or even interacting snakes can have on either the keeper or the person interacting with the snake. I think many of you will already have a deep sense of what that means, but may have never actually thought about it or articulated it. Shira does a perfect job of doing this. We discuss how beneficial it is to care for animals and interact with them, and we spend a ton of time discussing neurodivergence and why herpetoculture tends to draw in people who are maybe autistic or ADHD or any of those sort of out-of-the-box thinkers that really are typical in the herpetoculture community. This is a very powerful episode. I think it highlights some of the crucial factors of herpetoculture, why it's actually a benefit to the society in general, but I think many of you will really connect deeply with this episode, so I'm very excited for you to hear it. Let's jump into the show. As always, thank you very much to Liam Sinclair over at Reptiles and Research for editing the podcast, and I will see you guys at the end of the episode. Enjoy. Let's do it. All right, Shira, welcome to the podcast. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really, really grateful to be here.
Yeah, I'm very excited to talk to you. I'm not sure when I first bumped into you on Instagram, but probably, would it be like a year ago? Would that make sense? I'm not sure when you started kind of putting consistent content out. Not that long ago, but
yeah, I mean, that's when I started kind of being more present on Instagram. Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so yeah, at least like 8 months or so, I've probably been aware of you. So I know that the topic we're going to discuss today is one that's very interesting and not something that we've really talked about on the podcast before, which is why I think this is going to be a cool episode. I know your initial kind of experience as a younger individual, whether that was you're a child or just in your earlier adult life, you were had some fear of snakes, and obviously this has transitioned to the complete opposite. So can you just give us your history with snakes?
Yeah. I mean, with reptiles in general, I was okay. I've always been an animal lover. I wasn't exposed to a lot of reptiles as a kid, but the animal lover and then everything except snakes. I was terrified of snakes. So yeah, I was surprised by one as a kid, and it just, kind of like traumatized me.
Like a wild one?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I was like playing by a pond in my neighborhood and just got startled, and it just instilled this like crazy fear in me. There were water snakes in that pond, and we swam in the pond. So, it was just like, that was the one animal that I couldn't handle. And my best friend since I was 4, her older brother had a ball python, and I didn't want anything to do with that snake until I was I think I was 18, and he finally convinced me to hold the snake after many, many years of trying. And I've said this before, but when I did finally hold the snake, it was like the closest thing to a religious experience I've ever had. Like, it was like an instantaneous shift in my perspective. I was just completely overcome with awe and fascination, and the fear was just, it just disappeared.
How did you get to the point where you were willing to actually put it in your hand, though?
I've said this on another podcast. I think he probably got me stoned.
Okay, so there was a little bit of influence just to get you relaxed. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it was so long ago, so I'm not 100% sure like what he finally said that got me to finally do it. But I do know that he handed it to me and kind of walked away,
Mm.
just kind of left it with me, which I would never do personally, with anyone who is afraid of snakes. But um, it was fine. I had an incredible experience, so much so that I went and got a snake the next day for
That is
myself.
wild.
It's completely wild and irresponsible. I mean, I was 18.
Yeah, yeah.
I was 18. I didn't know anything, you know. I also did not know how to take care of a snake, but it was the 90s, and,
Yes.
you know,
That's how it
there
goes.
wasn't a lot of, yeah, unfortunately. Yeah.
So
But
that,
yeah.
that is a pretty remarkable, like kind of like from 0 to 100 essentially. So the next day you obviously woke up and you weren't like, oh my God, I can't believe I held a snake. That was so scary. You actually, that feel of excitement and the fascination still carried on to the next day, and enough to get you
Oh,
to the
yeah.
pet store.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. It was all I could think about. I went to, I was just all night. I was just like, I need that, what that was. I need that feeling. I need to see more. I need to touch more. I was just like obsessed with it. So I went to a pet store, and, this was like, they had like a couple reptiles. It was like a grain and feed and, a handful of pets, store. And I got a BCI.
Mm.
And obviously they did not give me the best information about how to take care of him, but I loved that animal. I just loved him so much.
Did you
And
know
he was
like what you were getting into buying like a boa? Obviously, size wise, there's a whole bunch of implications with getting a much larger animal. No.
no, of course not. I mean, I I think they might have told me, but did I really understand that? No,
Mm.
I didn't. And that's a big issue still.
Yes. Yeah.
I think, um, and it's something that I try and combat now. But back then, I don't think I really understood. No, I
And
just
then
was
how
like
long did you have that animal?
over 20 years.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah. So he was really the only snake I had for about another decade, though. I had a pretty nomadic lifestyle in my 20s, so it wasn't really even possible for me to keep more than him. And so I didn't consider getting any more snakes. It was just him
Mm.
and me. We were buds. And we had I had a really deep connection with that animal. And what I wouldn't do now, I did then, which was like I took him everywhere with me, when
Mm.
I could. I loved sharing him with anyone who would be open to meeting him. Kind of like that shift that happened to me. I was like, I want everyone doing this.
Yes. Yeah.
um, but yeah, I really I think back on getting him, and my heart hurts a little bit, or a lot actually, about how little I knew about how to properly care for him. I mean, he lived to 21, so we didn't do everything wrong, but
Yeah, and it sounds
still.
like you still had a good relationship with that animal, and like you said, 20 years is a long time. I mean, who knows how long they live for? Maybe 30, but who knows that every animal is different. That's just the way it is. So that's still a pretty remarkable story. What do you? Maybe you've dwelled on this, or maybe not. What do you chalk up the experience from the first time you held a ball python, that like very powerful, like you said, it was like basically the closest you've had to a religious experience? Do you have any explanation for what that was? Was it because there was such a high level of fear associated with that and you overcoming it, or is it just a mystery to you?
Um, no, I don't think it's a mystery. I think that, when you just the way that they move and they feel, they're so foreign, right? They're
Mm.
so different from us. But it's beautiful and fascinating, and it feels like nothing you've ever felt before. And it just the tactile experience, one, and then just how beautiful their movements are, how they're all muscle and how their scales feel. I mean, I don't know
Yeah,
if that
yeah.
was very well explained.
No, no,
But
it's, I mean, I think many people have that same, especially with something like a ball python that's going to just sit there. It's not going to, like, move around quickly or strike at you out of fear typically. And I'm trying to remember, I think maybe the first snake, well, no, I mean, I would have caught like garter snakes and stuff in the wild, but the first pet snake I would have held that would just sat there would have been a ball python as well. And I can still kind of remember even like the weight of it in your hands and like the softness of the scales, and it's a very different feeling from what you imagine it will be until you feel it. You're like, oh, this is like a very, is in many ways suddenly you feel that it's a living being, and that's something that maybe when you are afraid of it or you've not interacted with it before, it's very like an other situation, and maybe you treat it as something that you just can never relate to. But when it's in your hands and you feel it, you feel the life in your hands in a weird way.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Suddenly, this is not this scary, like looming, symbol or trigger. It's a living being. And suddenly you're realizing there's so much you don't know.
Yes.
There's so much beauty that you've never experienced before. And it's right here and it feels amazing. And it's not trying to hurt you. It has no interest in hurting you. And so, yeah, it's an extremely powerful experience.
Yeah. So now you are more settled. You said you were quite nomadic before. Now it's you have a home, you have an established place. Tell us about what you have in your home now for snakes.
So, after he died, I took a break. I was extremely devastated. So I just kind of like no more snakes for a little while. But then when I did get back into it, I came at it from a very different angle. I actually, didn't plan on getting a lot of snakes or anything. I just started with the one, just starts with one. But I spent a lot of time researching and learning about snakes first. And, because I was starting to miss the energy of having a snake around me. So all of a sudden there's YouTube videos about them. This was not a thing before. So I kind of started obsessively consuming content about snakes, and which is also when I really understood my past mistakes. But now that I'm settled, well, first it started with a Mexican black king snake. And then within the next 5 months, I had another type of king snake, a Tarahumara mountain king snake, and then a Dominican red mountain boa. And then once I had, a home that, I owned a home and was settled, that's when I kind of completed my snake family. And that's 9 snakes in total.
Okay.
So, yeah, mostly boas. And so Dumerals, BCI morph, Colombian rainbows, Madagascar tree boa, and a Japanese rat snake. So
okay.
9 in total. Yeah.
Cool. I think we have a very similar taste in snakes. I think those are all great species.
Yeah, I think so. But that's it. No more.
That's the end. Okay, so you're capped at that. And the premise of this conversation, I think, will kind of comes out of this an initial introduction to yourself and your experience, because your brand is snake therapy. That's what you have on Instagram. That's what your videos are kind of surrounded about, and that's kind of in many ways a bizarre topic and a bizarre just thing in general for people. Even if you are a snake person, it's something that you may not have come across. So I would love to start first with your relationship with therapy in general, because typically when people go into therapy, like they want to be a therapist or help other people, was there an experience that you've had that's drawn you to want to help people in this way, or is this just something that came out of nowhere?
It's a really interesting question, because I hadn't really thought about it in that way, like coming in to be kind of a therapist. That wasn't how I approached it. I mean, joy is contagious, right?
Yeah.
Joy, wonder, it's contagious. So That's definitely a part of it. But I have to be quite honest. I mean, it's first and foremost about the animals for me,
Yes.
more
Yeah.
than it is about the humans. But because it's humans that are keeping them, I guess I felt like the best path to help the animals is try to help people feel better in connection with them. And recognizing how good it made me feel was part of that. I'm also a really sensitive and empathetic person, and I think I was feeling how much suffering and division is in the world right now, which was only making me feel helpless and just reinforced my depression. So yeah, I thought about how like just doing my own thing wasn't really making any real difference in the world, and it just felt like it was falling apart, especially during the Trump years and COVID.
Mm.
Um, so yeah, it was during COVID that I started. There was this like everybody's separated and hurting in one way or another, and everybody was.
Yeah,
And there was
absolutely.
this, wanted to reach out and bring joy or connect across these divides. And that was when I started making videos about my snakes, but it was for my niece and nephew, who were, their parents were kind of going nuts in the house with them.
Yeah, yeah.
And so I just made these like cute little, raw iPhone videos of like, this is my snake, and kind of talking to them about it. And I realized that it not only made me happy to do it, it was bringing them joy.
Mm.
It was this contagious thing. And I saw some other parents posting on Facebook about how they were losing their minds stuck in their houses with their kids. And so I was like, you do you want these videos too? I could send them to you. And there was this really great response. I mean, they were all just like super happy, and like the kids were excited, and uh, it felt really good to me, and it felt really good like making other people happy,
Mm.
even if it was just, I mean, I wasn't saving the world. I was just simply sharing joy and wonder with no motive other than appreciating animals and
Yes.
being, you know, finding wonder in the world. So then it kind of went from, aren't these animals amazing, to they can actually make us feel better directly if we just take the time to appreciate and learn about them. And I was like, more people should feel this way.
Yeah.
The more people feel joy, happiness, and empathy, the less they focus on division and negativity. So
Yeah.
that's kind of where it came. That's how it came for me.
Yeah, yeah, that
Yes.
makes a lot of sense. I mean, it's amazing how damaging just the online space is for many people all the time, because it is very divisive, and the things that blow up as far as being viral is usually negative or something bad happening, and it can be very overwhelming for people. So that it does make a lot of sense, and so I think many people will have heard of just animal therapy in general, and that's something that I think is a concept that's been around for a while. Is that, were you involved with animal therapy before kind of linking these, or did this experience and realizing that snakes could have this effect on people get you to start looking into animal therapy?
No, it was kind of separated by a
Okay.
little while, like maybe, I don't know, months or a year. I started doing those little things and thinking about it in myself, but not really as a broader concept. And then I met and got involved with Erin Maxick and the Little Zoo a few years ago. And that's really what I have to give her all the credit, because she was the one who really brought like the concept of animal therapy into my life.
Mm.
And, um, you know, the concept is pretty straightforward. I mean, interacting with animals is therapeutic. It comforts us, it calms us, encourages us to be present, focuses on these beautiful creatures. It feels good. But it's not something that everybody has the opportunity to have, especially not with pets that are beyond or animals that are beyond like the norm of like dogs and cats. So the Little Zoo is a nonprofit that Aaron founded, whose mission is to bring joy and connection through spending time with animals, for little or no cost, specifically to people who are in need or at disadvantage. Or these are, people who might not even have pets or have any opportunity to interact with animals. And she has a very eclectic family of animals herself, from like guinea pigs and chickens to hedgehog and reptiles. And the mission work involves visiting at senior care homes, foster kids, with people with disabilities, low-income schools. Make-A-Wish Foundation actually asked her to do a visit. And it's not just about showing people and educating people about the animals, but actually giving them the opportunity to hold, touch, feel, physically spend time with the animals.
That's really cool. So when you're involved with it, or when you're volunteering or helping with her, does it you just tag along as she brings a group of animals and you bring snakes along with her?
Well, so when we connected, she asked if I wanted to volunteer and bring some of my snakes, just come along and, see it and be part of it. And I thought it was a fantastic idea, especially, because you think of therapy animals and you think furry.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Dogs, and cats, she had reptiles. She had lizards and a tortoise and some snakes. And I was like, hell yeah, that sounds really cool. And it also felt like an opportunity to simultaneously like help more people get over their bias of snakes. So yeah, I did a few of those, and just watching what happens when people get to do this, the delight and the joy that comes from just these small interactions, it changed me. Like it still gives me chills, and I've been involved for years now.
Yeah.
It's just such a beautiful thing. So, I ended up, it was so inspiring that I decided I was not just going to be a volunteer. I became part of the board of the nonprofit and continued to volunteer, and do therapy visits. And it's what really inspired me to explore the idea of snakes as therapy animals much more.
Yeah. Well, that's fascinating. So I can just imagine it's probably very similar to the experience that you talked about at the beginning with your own kind of jumping over the fear as you pull out a snake at like an old folks home or whatever it is, a hospital or something, and people are probably terrified or just like surprised that even snakes are part of this experience. And do you find that most people are willing to actually connect with the animal physically, or just are there some people that are like, there's no way, get that snake out of here, or what's the general vibe? Okay.
It's both. Absolutely. Yeah. Every single visit, there's both. There's
Gotcha.
People that are, and in between, there's the people that are like, whoa, cool. Or there's the people that are like, get that away from me. What? And then there's the people that are like, and, I've had great interactions with all of them. Some of them stay on the no thank you, no thank you. Yeah. And that's fine. That's I don't try and push it too hard.
Of course. Yeah.
But I've absolutely had many experiences where they start off with no thank you, no thank you, and by the end they are like me. Oh my God, these are amazing. Yeah.
Imagine how empowering that must be for those individuals, right? They spend their whole life being terrified.
Exactly.
That's so
Exactly. That's
cool.
another aspect of what I think of as snake therapy is empowerment, because getting over your fears is no small feat, no
Mm.
matter what it is. I mean, that's a process of that's a therapeutic process. It's empowering to get over a fear, no matter what it is. So that's kind of something that I do bring into the mix of like, how do you feel? Doesn't that feel good?
Yes.
You don't you feel good about yourself? You look at you. I give them lots of like praise, uh, especially if they were nervous in the first part. Like I give them tons of praise. Look at you. See, this is awesome. You're so good. Like you're so powerful. You just look at you. It was nothing for you. Kind of making sure that it's helping them connect with the animal and appreciate the animal, and then giving them positive feedback as well.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. That's fascinating. So let's break down snake therapy a little further. This is, as you said, you really, this experience with working with Little Zoo has opened this whole idea of snake therapy up even further. So what are some of the main aspects that you see? We covered some of them already, but maybe you could just kind of lay it out for us.
Yeah. So interacting with and caring for snakes has therapeutic benefits you could categorize.
Mhm.
Okay. So there's physical and sensory, mental, emotional, social, and behavioral. So for the physical, we talked about how it feels on your skin, that, like you said, the heavier bodied snakes, there's a great analogy of like a weighted blanket, the
Mm-hmm.
comfort of a
Yes. Yeah.
weighted blanket. These sensations can cause measurable changes to a person's heart rate and lower and soothe anxiety. Then there's the mental, which they stimulate your brain from the visual beauty of them and fascination, the encouragement to think in ways that they may have not before. So they're opening their minds to something that's unfamiliar. Um, and or for those of us who already work with snakes, there's the benefit of you know learning about them more, and you know focusing on their habitats, and when you're doing that, you're not thinking about the bad things.
Mm-hmm.
You're refocusing from negative thoughts to positive thoughts and taking in new information. And then both of those former benefits lead to emotional benefits. Being soothed and mentally stimulated makes you feel excited about life and happier. And feeling affection and love for the animal can be balm to emotional turmoil and loneliness. Feeling that sense of connection to the animal is a social benefit, in that there's that empowering feeling, with the trust,
Mm-hmm.
feeling of trust with an
Yeah.
animal that's so different from yourself. Um, and then the behavioral benefits, like the process of caretaking. For me personally, and for many people I've spoken with about it, the act of providing for them, the routines that you have to build to care for them, can help motivate you and instill a sense of purpose. So, when you're depressed, motivation is pretty challenging. You don't want to
Yeah.
get out of bed, but if there's this animal that you love who needs you in order to survive, you stop thinking about yourself and your worries, and you get out of bed and you do what needs to be done for them. And then the feedback loop is a sense of pride and accomplishment and self-confidence.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. I think that's incredibly well put. I mean, it is amazing how your brain, if you're for someone who's ever struggled with like mental health issues, just the act of doing something and actually getting your body like there's almost like an inertia where if you're stuck in bed or you're stuck in
yeah,
your chair and you're this paralysis, it's very hard to get going. But once you start rolling forward, then it becomes easier and easier. And a lot of times just having these tasks. If it's small, like changing water dishes, suddenly you're changing the water dishes and now your day has started, and you can continue on a day. It has nothing to do with the animals for the rest of the day, but you needed that thing to get you moving initially. And that's something that I've talked about from the very beginning with this podcast, is the sense of responsibility that people get from caring for animals is in many ways the most important thing about keeping animals. Of course, there's the elements of welfare for the animal and everything, of course, but having that sense of responsibility can really make you a completely different person and a better person in society.
Yep. Absolutely. 100%. Yeah.
So it's amazing. And that's where people say, oh, why do you keep snakes, or how do you keep reptiles? It doesn't make any sense. But there's so much more. It's almost like an iceberg. You have this like little tip. Yeah, you keep a snake and it's pretty cool, but there's so much happening underneath for so many of us. And for some reason, the reptile hobby really does pull in people, I think, who have, I don't know whether it's neurodivergence or, there's just different things that bring us together. And it could be just because reptiles and snakes are peculiar. So the fact that you're drawn to those things maybe means that you have a slightly different way of looking at the world. Who knows what it is? But I'd be curious to know, like, what is the response that you get from people? Because I'm sure you're putting out this content and you're probably speaking to people's hearts when you're talking about this stuff. And because there are so many of us who are like bizarre as far as, you don't necessarily fit in with society, do you have a lot of people that are sort of thanking you for creating this content?
I was just talking about this last night with my husband. Unbelievable the response has been. I mean, I'm a tiny channel right now. It's small, but every day the comments that I'm getting and the responses that I'm getting from people are blowing my mind. They're just so beautiful. And it's like people saying, I've always felt this way, but I didn't think anyone talked about it, or sharing how much love they have for their animals and sharing things about it and saying thank you, and it's just been incredible. It's been so beautiful. I had no idea. I didn't know it was going to be this amazing.
Well, I think it does make sense. I mean, do you have a sense of why? And maybe this is all hobbies. I don't know. It's one of the only hobbies that I'm involved with. But do you think that the reptile herpetoculture in general does draw more people who are like slightly out of the box as far as like our societal norms goes? The best part about providing high-quality reptile husbandry is you get to develop a long-term relationship with your animal. Meet Jackson, my 18-year-old crested gecko. Jackson lives on the BioDudes Terrafauna substrate, which is one of their substrates that's specifically designed for warm biomes and humidity spikes. Like all other BioDudes substrates, it contains organic content to help support the plant life in Jackson's vivarium. It also holds moisture very well, which means humidity is never an issue, even in my dry climate. Another favorite of mine is the BioDudes Bug Grub. This is a supplement powder made from natural ingredients like carrots, beets, spirulina, oats, and potatoes. Everybody knows how important gut-loading feeder insects is, and this simplifies it for me and allows me to be confident when I feed both Jackson and my tarantulas that they're getting the nutrients they need to thrive. Also, if you have a lot of babies right now, this is a great way to help fortify the diets of neonatal reptiles. The BioDude has a ton of great educational content on both his YouTube channel and the website, all about bioactive care, and it's just one of those brands that's doing their part to push herpetoculture into a positive direction and give reptile keeping a better name. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Do you have any sense of why?
We can get into that. We can get into that if you want to talk about the neurodivergence.
I would love to. Yeah. Let's definitely talk about that. Yeah.
Yeah. This is such a fascinating topic. It's so fascinating. Well, so there's, yes, the otherness. That's, I mean, on a basic level, I think, without the neurodivergent aspect, I'm a weirdo. I've always been a weirdo. And I've always liked things that are different. And I think that's part of why people love, people in the reptile community, they're all kind of different. So that's definitely a thing. But as far as neurodivergence goes, there's two aspects I kind of wanted to talk about here. And there is the what I've observed by sharing snakes with neurodivergent people through the little zoo.
Mm.
And then there's what I'm learning about the relationship between reptile keeping and neurodivergent people. There's overlap, but there's two different parts to it. Is that okay if I?
Yes, please. Those sound like
Okay.
two fascinating categories. Yeah.
Okay, so the first time I really took note of the effects of snakes on neurodivergent people was at one of the little zoos community days for autistic kids. So we do these free events once every month or two with the Professional Child Development Associates nonprofit. It's an organization that helps young folks with autism and their families through like community and relationship building and therapy services. And they come to the zoo events and they bring the kids and often some of their family members to spend some time with the animals. And we set up stations around with the different types of animals so they can kind of wander through. And I was shocked that my snake table was surrounded for like almost the entire 2 hours. And these kids could not get enough of them. And some of the kids were high functioning, communicative. They were offering commentary about what they knew or thought they knew about them, asking questions. And then there were other kids who were super quiet and just wanted to hold the animals. Either way, there was just this level of focus and interest that was really interesting to me. But one of the most interesting interactions that really struck me was this young man who he was not very verbal, but he managed to let me know that he really wanted to hold a snake. So I talked to him about how to hold it properly and handed the snake to him. And he just stood there and was just completely focused on this animal, so calm and gentle. And I let him be for 10 or 15 minutes. And then when I turned back to ask if I could take the snake back, and I kind of went towards him, he almost violently startled back from me when I got within a couple of feet of him. He did not want me in his personal space. I think he actually said, like, space, and yet he was getting so much out of the direct contact with this animal and the connection to the animal, the touch. And I will never forget that, because it was just like, so he didn't want anything to do with a human's touch and he needed personal space, but yet the snake was just all.
That is fascinating. So there was some tactile experience that he was craving that he was not getting somewhere else. And it was obviously a very different experience touching people. People's skin is moist and warm and, something that's cool and dry. And for whatever reason, it was connection.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's also that he chose.
Right.
He chose the interaction. And that's a big thing that comes up in the next category with neurodivergent keepers too. It's come up a lot, is that it's an intentional interaction, whereas people are unpredictable.
Yes.
And there's expectation and they're complicated. And this is not that. Snakes is not that. So as far as keeping and neurodivergent folks, I mean, I can speak from my own experience. I didn't know I was ADHD and with anxiety disorder. I didn't know until later in life. And I was, masking a lot of those characteristics too. But once I did, and I started actively learning more about neurodiversity in depth, that's when I started to kind of make this connection in my head. And I realized that as far as my experience, the snakes were acting as a positive way to narrow my focus and my distraction, physically, holding them, it caused me to stop and be present and mindful. It eased my anxiety. Even just observing them can help with that, right? And then you need that presence and that mindfulness in order to make them feel safe, right? You have to be there. You have to watch their body language. You can't be all over the place.
Yeah.
And if you do this, there's this amazing reward of trust that you get. It's very unique that you get this trust from that. They don't judge you. Again, they're not humans with complicated social cues that you have to think about, and they don't demand your attention like a dog or a cat. They're not going to like jump in your lap, you know. You are prepared for the interaction. You are intentionally interacting with them. There's no social conventions that you have to worry about. No expectations to say or do something.
Yeah.
You're just yourself. They allow you're just yourself. And then there's those, what we talked about earlier is those purposes, the sense of purpose and the tasks, the routines, which when you're neurodivergent can be very hard to keep on. You have to complete these tasks. You can't just not do them. So that's a real positive for people like me, where I can't be, nope, this time to this time, I have to go through a series of motions that complete tasks. So that really helps me. And then there's hyperfocus.
I think everybody's, a lot of people listening will be like, oh yeah, I know that.
Yeah. So those of us who are neurodivergent have a tendency to hyperfocus, somewhat obsess on something. And in this case, it's positive. It's learning about animals. It's learning about caring and learning about how to, make another being's life better. Yeah. That's a healthy outlet for hyperfocus. There are plenty of bad outlets for hyperfocus. So it's not going to harm you, and it's certainly not going to harm, it's going to help the animal to hyperfocus. And the more I thought about this from my experience, the more I noticed how many times I'd seen keepers referencing their ADHD, like just offhand references on Instagram or whatever, or saying their autistic kids were interacting with the reptiles and saying how cool it was to watch. And, and I listened to Summer Winston talk about their experience with Roy on Project Herpeticulture.
Yes, yeah.
That episode was amazing. And that's when I was like, wait a minute, maybe this is a thing. Like, not just for me, but maybe this is a thing. So I that's when I kind of like sat down and hyper-focused on hyper-focusing.
Yeah. Like hyper-focus inception. Yeah.
Yeah. I sat down and just wrote about my own experience. And then within a few hours, I'd done that and built a survey to see if more people might want to share and talk about it. And to see if it was a thing,
Oh yeah. I mean, I want to talk about that survey too, so we'll come back to that point. I think it absolutely is a thing. I mean, I think many people are definitely either on the autism spectrum. I shouldn't say many, but many, but maybe not the majority, but many are on the spectrum that way, or lots of ADHD situations. And I mean, I think obviously it can get the wrong way where you start hyper-focusing on the wrong things, like purchasing things, and you start getting these large collections. But
definitely want to talk to you about that.
Yeah. So we'll get into that. But one point that I think was great that you mentioned was this voluntary side to it. And for me personally, I love dogs. I don't have a dog, and I'll probably never have a cat because my wife and I are both allergic. But dogs are, to me, they can be very overwhelming because there's this sense of like there's a needy side to it where they come to you, and I do love dogs. I love playing with dogs, but there's something about having reptiles that doesn't have that pressure associated with like needing to do something with them, or they're coming to see you for some they want affection as well. And many people, they build off that, right? Like if you're a real dog person, you get you build your energy off of that dog wanting that. For me, it's like draining. Like I don't want you in my space. Actually, I want you to, because we have someone in our family has a dog. I love that dog, but sometimes you're sitting on the couch and you don't want the dog next to you, but it wants to be next to you, and you just like, I just want space. Just can you please go over there? But reptiles does not come with that.
Yeah, no, I have a dog, and I love her endlessly. I mean, I can't even imagine my life without her. And sometimes she gives me major anxiety.
Yes.
When she's she's very needy.
Yeah.
She's very, very attached. And I love her for that sometimes. And also sometimes I actually get like, it makes me anxious.
Yeah.
And I have a really strong reaction sometimes to it. And it makes me sad when I have that reaction. But yeah, it's very, very different. I'm not, and cats, they'll just like jump on you, and I can't do it.
Yeah. So reptiles kind of alleviate that. And like I said, I love dogs. I think dogs are awesome. I eventually will have a dog when I'm in a different place that has more space for one, but I can definitely see the appeal in reptiles that don't come with that. So let's talk about, I want to talk about the like we said, the negative side, maybe the over purchasing and things. And I also want to talk about the survey. What do you think? Which one would you rather talk about first?
I think we could go with the survey, and that would lead really well into the overall, like, here's the positive, here's the negative.
Yes. Okay. So tell me about the survey. You know, you put together a survey, you made a video on this topic and prompted people to do a survey. So tell us what the survey entailed, and then maybe we could talk about some of the data you've collected.
Okay. Yeah. So, I'm a huge data systems nerd. It's actually what I do for work. So I built a survey and an app with platforms so I could interact with and analyze the responses. And the survey I built, well, first of all, I made sure that it could be totally anonymous if people wanted to, because I wanted to make sure that I got as many responses as I could without pressuring people to reveal who they were if they wanted to stay private. So they could not enter any contact details or anything, or they had the option to say that they might want to discuss it further with me in private, or they could say they wanted to be interviewed for an episode and enter their contact details. I was actually a bit surprised at how many people wanted to do that. But so none of the fields were required. They could just fill out whatever they wanted, and then I could use whatever they did as data points. So there were checkbox or drop-down fields and some free text fields with some prompts that they could write as little as or as much as they wanted. So I asked what conditions they were diagnosed or identified with, what age bracket they were in, gender identity, because I actually learned that there's a pretty high rate of LGBTQ folks in the neurodivergent community. And I was really interested to get a window into the overlap with reptile keeping as well. And also, if I ended up interviewing people, I wanted to make sure I had a diverse, representation. I asked how long they'd been keeping reptiles, if they kept snakes, lizards, amphibians, and other pets, and how many. If they were breeders, and if they were, did they have animals they considered to be pets rather than assets? And then I had the prompts for the free form. Do you want to? I don't know if you want to hear those. What those questions were.
Yeah.
It's actually really that's where the good stuff was. So the first one was, what are some positive effects you feel that keeping and interacting with these animals offer you, and how does that coincide with your neurodiversity? Then, if you have multiple types of animals, which one do you feel most benefits your mental health, and why? And then I asked them, why do you think reptiles are appealing to the neurodivergent community in general? And then how do they get into reptiles? And I went through all the free form answers, started highlighting things in here or there that I found interesting.
Did you get quite a few responses?
I did. Yeah.
That's amazing.
It was amazing. I wasn't sure. I was like, maybe maybe I'll get a few, but I got a lot.
That tells you it really speaks to people.
Yeah. And they're still trickling in too. I keep having to adjust my data because I'm like, another one. Okay, cool. That's really awesome. Cool. It was cool too, because I mean, as I said, I'm a very tiny channel, and this particular video brought so many new people. Yeah. It was really interesting.
Well, that's what's fascinating, because it's a small channel, which is everybody. That's how you always start. And it's not like there's like millions of views on this video. So I would expect like a survey like that, which is quite comprehensive, to get like 2 or 3 people doing them, just submissions. No. It's a way more than that.
A lot more. Yeah.
That's amazing. So I would say anything over 10, I'd be totally blown away. So that's fascinating. Well, congrats on that. That means you're actually speaking to people. You're actually hitting something, because to have that, I've done like free T-shirt giveaways and had like 10 people respond, like stuff like that. So the fact that you've had that much people respond to something that's really comprehensive, and you can tell a person with ADHD designed it, because there's no required field. That's such a thing. You open, you're like, oh, these things are required. I'm just going to close this right now. So it's an easy barrier to entry to get people into
it. I figured, if you require one thing and it hits one person in the wrong way, they're just going to not do it.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I was like, look, I'll take whatever you want to give me. And most people answered every single one.
Yeah.
They didn't,
that's cool.
Whether or not they put their personal information, they mostly answered they put something in every single box. Or wrote something. It was I think there was only one that didn't write in the free form.
And it's still open right now, right?
Yep.
So maybe in this episode of the podcast, I'll make sure because people will be, I want to do that. So I'll make sure I put that in the links in the description, show notes and whatnot.
Yeah.
So if anyone feels called to do it, please go do it.
Yeah, because I mean, here's the thing. What I realized is this is content like that we could explore for years.
Yeah.
I mean, especially if people want to come and talk about it, because everybody's going to have unique experiences, and there's a lot of similarities. And that's what I was going to say next.
So please, can you tell us a little bit of what you've learned?
Yeah. I went through all the freeform answers, and I started highlighting things here or there that I found interesting. And then as I did so, I realized that there were a lot of common reflections. Even if the wording was slightly different, I could summarize those into themes. Mm-hmm. So I built a table of all the themes. I went through everything like a couple times to, kind of find those themes, made a table of those, went back through the responses. And anytime I saw that theme, I linked to the person. So that meant that I could see how many times this was said over the span of all the responses. And there was some top ones that, came up. I don't know how far you wanted me to go into this.
No, you got to tell us now. And I mean, unless you're wanting to save some of this for your own channel, and I could totally respect that as well. But I would love to hear some of the common themes that have popped up.
I mean, again, this can be explored in so many ways, and I will do so. I'm already starting to follow up and talk to people about their responses and get more details. But so I'm fine with just, here's the top themes.
Yeah. Give us the Coles notes.
Yeah. So, okay. Tied at the top were calming, soothing, and easing anxiety. That was 60% of people said that. And then another 60% said that they identified with or appreciated reptiles because these animals are seen as weird or different or other, just like they are. Mm. My favorite response was outcasts, no outcasts. I loved that. It was so
That's awesome.
beautiful. But I mean, it was just everywhere. It was a thing. Like, oh, we know we're weird too. And we identify with this. We identify with these maligned creatures, you know. And then right below that was the special interest learning, research, hyper focus. That was the next top theme.
That is fascinating. I mean, I'm sure many people are nodding their heads listening to this. So yeah, that sounds me. That sounds like me. That sounds like me. That it's really fascinating, and and then it ironically connects us in a way, or not in a way. It literally connects us. You have people who do feel maybe out of the box or not quite fitting in with what other people want to do, and then we create a community around this concept of keeping the animals that are also kind of seen as out of the box, and then suddenly you have a community of people who are now in the box together.
Exactly.
You know, and that's a really important piece.
And that was part of it too. A lot of people, said, I don't talk to people. I don't leave the house. People are complicated. And yet, I loved this one, info dumping as a love language. That was one of the most beautiful things I read. It was so beautiful. And it's so true because, those of us who love our reptiles, we love to talk about our reptiles. Yes. And if you're not someone, if the person is not someone who's into reptiles, they're, eyes glaze over, they're just like, oh, what are you? So to find somebody else who accepts that this is what you want to talk about, and you can just talk for hours. That's a really big deal for people with neurodivergence.
Oh yes,
who and social engagement. I mean, even people were saying like, I don't like to talk to people, but having to go to a reptile store or a reptile expo or whatever, I've engaged with people in ways I haven't. Or for me personally, I mean, it's changed my social world entirely.
Me too.
I've never interacted with as many people in my life. It's crazy. Yeah, really amazing. And the other cool ones were that a lot of people said were the lack of judgment and social expectation, and then the sense of purpose. A lot of people said that, and then focus and concentration were another one, and the level of maintenance, and engagement, required. So that was those are the top. Yeah.
Well, that is really interesting. I can't wait to watch you kind of break all that down further on your channel and kind of get into these. Like you said, you can dig into the weeds forever on these. And the listeners, if I'm sure many of them will now move to that survey to continue to complete it, because I think it's really important for us to collect some of that information. It also goes to, I think it's very important for us to explain how important keeping reptiles is to non-reptile keepers in a way that shows us why it's helpful to the keeper themselves and why it makes the individual a better person. And we still, like, the animal welfare is still so crucial, and we want to make sure that's still on a pedestal and that we're never sacrificing animal welfare in this, in this chase to better ourselves. But it is so important to say, like, hey, these are the reasons that it actually works for many people. And maybe you have somebody who's super shy or autistic, and now they're engaging with people. I mean, you can't say that's a bad thing as long as the animals are being cared for well as well.
I mean, that's part of that's part of why I started the channel as well, because I wanted to kind of break across the reptile channels are for reptile people boundary, because almost every reptile channel is for people who keep reptiles, but I wanted to show everybody that the positive things that these animals can do for humans, because as soon as you do that, as soon as you get someone to see with their own eyes how gentle these animals can be, how much joy it can bring people, then even if they don't keep the animals, they can become part of maybe dispelling myths about them, maybe not hating them, demonizing them like they do. And in this case, that's absolutely what I wanted to show is, maybe if we talk about this subject of how they support neurodivergent people a little more, it will bring it to light a little bit more that these are not weird things to be interested in, that they are beautiful, good things to be interested in.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, I love that. And so why don't we discuss a little bit about where it can take a left turn when we have people who are hyperfixated and we get latched onto something that I think one of the most dangerous parts about reptile keeping and invert keeping is how, like you said, the maintenance level is quite low. It's not like you have to walk your dog for every day, that sort of thing. So the actual time commitment to caring for them, you can get away with it being quite low, which means the barrier to entry to buying another one and another one is low. And that can be a very dangerous tightrope to walk for people who are on the ADHD side or neurodivergent side in general.
Yeah, I mean, what you said about that on the Daffy's Roundtable was, it was so poignant to me, because that's what got me to like reach out and be like, oh my God, I really want to talk about this, because yes, that is a danger. And it's pretty unique to her peeping. I see this habit of collecting as a really dark aspect of the hobby. And, what you said about reorienting that next hit to be about the next thing we can do for the animals we already have is one of the most important messages we could possibly give out to support animal welfare. And yes, it is definitely a danger, because we're seeking these dopamine hits, and that is a huge part of ADHD. That's a huge part of it. So, if you focus on when's the next one, I'll just get another one.
It's not good.
It makes me no. I drew a line in the sand for myself recently about taking on any more animals, because I started feeling spread thin with what I could give to them. And it was actually causing me stress instead of making me happy, which is what I was all about. I was like, wait a minute, this is starting to go the wrong direction with what my mission is. And I actually made an episode about it, and how I was going to refocus my energy on the ones I had and making their lives better. And it has been amazing for me.
Yeah.
It's been beautiful. I just built a 10-foot fully decked out DIY enclosure for a Mexican black king snake. And now I want to do it for all of them. Yeah. And it was just so rewarding. And so, yes, this message needs to be talked about. It needs to be put out there to kind of turn it around with the less is more. If you give more care to less, you get more. If you turn it around, that's therapeutic for the keeper as well, because the less you have, the more time you have to develop real bonds and connections with the animal and to get more joy from it. Instead, it can become desensitizing to the animals, and it becomes a chore. You lose so much of the beauty there if you just keep getting more and more and more and more.
Yeah. And I think it's really important to know that is kind of an artifact of some of these neurodivergent tendencies, and people who you just have to watch it. You have to be careful that you're not falling into those traps, because many people will go who are not on that neurodivergent scale, and they'll just go buy a leopard gecko, and then they have a leopard gecko for its whole life, and then that's it. They don't even think about potentially continuing to buy, and because it just doesn't cross that individual's mind. But as soon as you kind of get into that loop, then you continue to buy, and it's quite a dangerous. It's a dangerous spiral for sure. So I think.
Well, I didn't even think about it until I got involved in the community.
Right. Exactly.
But once the community, it's just in your face. Everybody's posting this new animal they got. Oh, another new animal. Oh, another new animal. And like, of course you're like, oh, that's really cool. I would love one of those. And then you just kind of get in this like, it's this feedback loop, but it's not really, it makes me uncomfortable.
Yeah. So go buy some isopod cultures or something and, do something like that if you feel like you need to get something new.
I would like to turn it back to the positive though.
Please.
And say that what I'm coming to understand as I talk to more people about this particular topic of neurodivergence and reptiles, and how reptiles support neurodivergent people, there are also aspects of being neurodivergent that can actually make people better caretakers. For example, the hyperfocus, right? They spend more time learning about their animals and how to provide for them.
Yeah.
They can be more prepared for emergencies and issues because they're 10 steps ahead. And extremely attention to detail, and the rewards that they get from the animals, especially the aspect of bonding through the otherness that they can't get from atypical society, actually encourages them to do even better. And that's what I'm hearing that from other people, and I'm recognizing it in myself. So I did kind of just want to end on the positive.
Yes.
But,
yeah. Of course. No, that's good.
Yeah.
And it's so true. I mean, it makes sense that neurodivergence is very common in herpetoculture, and it goes together well because it is in many ways a like superpower when it comes to keeping reptiles, because your brain does think in a different way. And yeah, and many of us who are listening to this will be doing things that they don't realize are kind of in that domain of almost abnormal behavior, but they're helping the animals, like doing that hyperfixation research. Like, who does that when they buy a hamster? Like, people are not going out to hamsters and looking up like the natural native habitats and trying to replicate. It's just not part of pet keeping in general. You'll see it on fish and you'll see it in reptiles, and that's just part of how our brains have always operated, no matter what we're doing. And it just so happens that it really works well for reptile keeping.
Yeah. So both of these things, the negative and the positive, we need to keep talking about it.
Mm-hmm.
I think they're both really, really important for all of us, not just neurodivergent people either.
Yeah,
all of us in the hobby.
Well, I think you're definitely walking down a path that's new and fresh for reptile keepers, but also not, because you're creating content that's new, but for many people you're speaking to them in a language that they are thinking about anyway, and that's probably why it's connecting with people, because they're thinking this themselves. And it's so important to have channels that actually start talking about things that people are thinking, because we need that. People are often afraid to talk about things that they feel like they're the only ones thinking. Like, I don't want to say this, is kind of embarrassing. So to see a channel that's going out there and actually saying, like, this is the brand, like, this is what we're talking about, this is how it works, it's very alleviating for people.
Yeah, I thought I was going to get laughed off the internet, to be honest, when I started this. I was prepared.
So did you just say, like, I'm just going to do this, I'm probably going to get,
Yeah, I was like, I mean, and I have gotten a few, nasty or unpleasant trolling comments, but I was very pleasantly surprised at the response of talking about this subject, of talking about how therapeutic this is, and how that therapeutic thing that we get makes us want to give. And that positivity, and instead of just, this is how you keep a snake, this is how you breed a snake. Mm-hmm. Like,
let's open the box.
There's more. There's so much more. And the more you focus on that goodness and that good feeling, the better the world's going to be, right? And I mean, I'm not changing the world. I'm just trying to put some more joy.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really valid thing. The example that I always talk about on the podcast, kind of when we're discussing this exact thing, is if somebody is a depressed person and they go out into their world that day, and every interaction they have is going to be a negative experience for the opposite person as well, for the person they interact with. Because if that person's in a bad mood, then you're dealing with somebody who's, whether you're at the bank, trying to communicate with the teller, or at a restaurant and you're being rude to them because you're depressed. If you flip it on its head and you give somebody something that, like we said, if it's just changing your water dishes, makes you feel better, more accomplished before you enter the world, and now those interactions that you have with those people are more positive, that actually does have a pretty significant ripple effect. Even if it's one person, they have several interactions a day, and it can actually change the world in a way that it's not about, like you said, the whole planet holding hands and keeping snakes, but to have those positive experiences is crucial to a high functioning society.
Well, yeah, and the coolest part is I'm watching it take off and take a mind of its own right now, because now it's not just people saying to me that they feel this and that they're like, oh yeah, this is good and I want to share this positive thing, but now, like on my Discord server, they're just going with each other, and they're commenting to each other, and they're so kind, and they're just pouring this like positivity to each other now. Or the lines of comments, they just build and build and build, and more people see that other people have said, I connect with this too, and I feel this too, and it just, now it's like, it's not even about me. Yeah, it's great. Yeah. It's beautiful. It's great. And the more we focus on that, the less we focus on the bad stuff.
Yes. And I think because of how much of a leading role the animal plays in this philosophy, it's very obvious to the keeper that the welfare of that animal needs to be high as well. So it's sort of like an underlying this thing that almost goes without saying, that the animal's welfare needs to be high. And I've talked about this before in the show. Sometimes you go to an expo or you'll be talking with keepers, and it's not obvious that the animal is the first priority. And actually, you're wondering if it's even second or third, even, because they're telling you about all the way they're talking. It's like, I'm actually not comfortable with the way you're talking about this. This doesn't seem like you're actually enjoying that presence of the animal. You're more so enjoying the concept of a hobby, keeping things that look different. And not everybody's like that, but I think there's a danger of that. And this philosophy that you've talked about here today really does put the animal first, because that you need to have a healthy animal that's connected well with its keeper for this to work at all.
Absolutely. I mean, that's some of the most important parts about when I share my snakes with people, with the little zoo, is like, what I talk about is not, this is a Colombian red, this, I say, this is what this species is. Do you see how cool this is? And like, what makes me happy about them is they have this personality, or this character trait, or they love to do this. And you're focusing on this living being, as opposed to, it is black, it eats snakes. Yes. It's not a thing. These are not things. And this is why I love Rex so much, because I'm with him. We can have bonds with these animals. We can connect with them. And people, not enough people are open to that even as a thing.
Yeah.
They just cannot conceive that reptiles could have that kind of connection with you, and they can.
Yes. And I think it loops us all the way back to the beginning of the conversation with having the epiphany that it is a living being itself that has its own, wants and needs. And I think that's kind of at the crux of this entire conversation. So I think, empathy. Yeah. Yeah, empathy. Exactly.
Yeah. And the more we empathize with them and we start to empathize with each other, it's just so important. There needs to be more empathy and compassion in this world, because it's a scary world right now.
Yeah, I think that's very well said. Shira, this is a fascinating conversation. It's a fascinating topic. I can't wait to watch your channel and everything develop. Is there anything that we didn't mention or say today that you wanted to make sure the listeners heard? I also want you to mention everywhere they can find you online. But if there's any like specific things that are worth mentioning, it's okay if there's not.
There's two big projects I wanted to just throw out there, and that's
go ahead.
one near and one in the future. I have a booth at the Reptile Super Show in Pomona next month, the end of June, which I will be using for several purposes. That is selling the snake shed metalwork jewelry that I make, but also to interview and talk with people about their connection to snakes and reptiles, and we can use that for the channel. And I will have a collection of care sheets to offer to anyone who might take them. Mariah Healy sent me hers from Reptiles, her expo specific guides, and I was really inspired by Summer's ethics regarding selling animals, and I just realized that, wait, why aren't there care guides required reptile shows? Wait, why is that not a thing? Like, nobody has them. That's so crazy to me. Yeah. So I wanted to I don't know, lead by example. And I'll just have as many from reputable sources as I can available for everybody there. But so if you're coming to the Reptile Show, come say hi.
What's the dates? Is that like June?
That's June 29th and
June
30th,
okay.
I believe. Yeah, it's the last weekend in June.
Perfect.
In Pomona. And then the big project, which is what really all of the channel and the work that I'm doing now is building towards. And that's having a brick and mortar snake therapy, serpent sanctuary, and educational facility.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that's the real goal.
That's amazing.
I don't really see myself as a YouTube content creator for the rest of my life. So the idea would be to have a place that people can come to have safe educational and therapeutic interactions with snakes. We could, and foster education about them and proper husbandry and care. Probably sell a select array of supplies and host guest educators from the herpetoculture world, outreach to schools, and if I can pull it off, a small rescue program. That's the most daunting part, but I would love to do that. So yeah, that's a really big one.
Yeah, well, I think that's a great goal to have, and you are well on your way to start establishing that. So that'll be very cool. The jewelry, I saw somebody, was it last week? Somebody I must follow on Instagram shared your jewelry. I forget who it was now.
Might have been Carrie from Girly Girl.
Yeah, maybe it was. Yeah, it could have been. I don't know. But anyway, can you quickly tell us about the jewelry, just so for the folks that are wondering what that is?
Yeah, real quick. I've been a metal worker for decades. It used to be what I did primarily. Now it's more kind of a hobby. But I decided to combine snake shed with metal jewelry and metal art. But I wanted to do it in a way that you could still feel the texture of the scales. You could still see everything. Whereas a lot of jewelry I've seen so far, they put glass or epoxy over top, so you can't actually touch. And so what I do is I make it so that you literally can feel the shed. And it's a very particular process of coating it with many types of lacquer, but they're thin enough that you can still see every scale and touch everything. So it's been really, really fun. And I've been making them for other people with their snakes shed.
That's cool.
Which has been, that's been the best. That's been super fun, because they get to wear their own animal and have them close to them. So yeah.
That is super cool. Well, Shira, thank you again for coming on the podcast and telling us all the stories that are associated with this and actually taking the plunge into talking about this topic, because like we said, it's something that is scary to talk about because you think that it's going to be embarrassing or people aren't going to connect with, but clearly the people are connecting with this. So please tell people where they can find everything, the jewelry, the snake therapy, Instagram, everything.
Okay. So on YouTube, it's snake_therapy, or just search for snake therapy with Shira Loa. On Instagram, it's snake therapy _Shira with Shira Loa. And I think there's no with. I think it's just snake therapy _Shira Loa. Yeah. And then jewelry, if you go to shiraloa.metalwork.com, there actually is a page on the top menu that says Snake Shed Metalwork that you can go, but there's tons of stuff you can look at there too.
Okay. Awesome. Well, of course, I'll include that in the show notes for everybody to go find, and I'll also make sure the survey's in the show notes too, because I know people will want to do that.
I'll send you the link.
Yeah, please do, and that would be great. So anyway, Shira, we'll have to follow up again in the future, because I think this is just, like we said, scratching the surface with this topic. So for today, thank you so much for being on the show, and thank you so much for taking the plunge and getting into the content creation world with such a fascinating topic. So thank you.
Thank you for having me. Really appreciate it.
Okay, that is the end of that episode. Shira, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your story and just, again, digging into this concept further. I can't wait to see how much more you get into it. I know you said it's essentially an endless endeavor getting into this content, and I could not agree more. So it'll be very exciting to watch you develop through this. And listeners, make sure you go check out Shira's content on our YouTube channel, because I know many of you will connect with it deeply as well. Thank you for listening to the podcast. If you're listening to it on Spotify or YouTube, feel free to drop a comment. I do read those, and I'll try to respond to most of them if I can. If you'd like to support the show financially, you can do that at patreon.com/animalsathome. That really does go a long way to help supporting the podcast. YouTube money is small and also very volatile, so it's not something that I can rely on. So if you're somebody who really does enjoy the podcast and you want it to continue on into the future, $5, $3 a month really does help. Even if it might seem like a small amount to you, it does add up, and it allows me to produce the show and pay for the editing and all the costs that are associated with this show. It is a lot of work. Like I always say, I do love doing it, but I want to make sure that I'm able to pay the people that are helping me do this as well. So that's at patreon.com/animalsathome. You can also check out Custom Reptile Habitats. There is an affiliate link in both the YouTube description and the show notes. If you do make a purchase using that link, a commission comes back to me at no extra cost to you. Or you can just share the show on social media, Facebook, Instagram. That really does go a long way to helping us find new listeners. It really is about finding new listeners. The YouTube algorithm does not always play well with long-form content. As you can see, everything is going towards short reels and shorts on YouTube, and that tends to be what YouTube is promoting right now. So if you did find value in this long-form content, sharing it, liking it, subscribing to the channel helps YouTube know that you actually want to listen to this, and it can go a long way, again, to helping promote the channel. I think that's it for this episode, everyone. I will catch you in the next one.